I once met a woman who worked with a toxic boss for just 6 months, but in that time, her self-esteem got ground down to dust through lots of little things, so that even though she'd been in that career for 20 years, after just 6 months of working for this boss, she felt incompetent and useless. The damage it caused her was so bad that when she tried to escape it and land a new job, she broke down in tears in the interview and couldn't get hired. And what's worse is this is not even the worst outcome you can get when working for a toxic boss. In this woman's case, the damage was obvious, but actually most of the impact from working with a toxic boss is invisible and keeps hurting you for many years, maybe even your whole life. Damaging your relationships, both work and personal, making you less likable, less likely to be promoted, and ultimately less happy. If you have a toxic boss, you have to take the right action to protect yourself, heal and address the situation, and make sure it doesn't happen again. And this is what I'm going to share with you in this video. To clean up this toxic mess, I need to tell you about the mirror trap. And for that, let's look at a great cinematic example of a toxic boss, Miranda Priestly in The Devil Wears Prada. This movie illustrates the trap beautifully, especially if you pay attention to what happens to the main character, Andrea. Now, everyone knows that Miranda, amazingly portrayed by Meryl Streep, is a toxic boss. She's rude, dismissive,
The tales of your incompetence do not interest me.
inspires fear,
Some reason that my coffee isn't here?
has no respect for her team,
Get us a reservation for dinner tonight at that place. Get me a good review of my thank you notes delivered today. Where is everyone? Why is no one working? I like the east side.
and to top it off,
An assistant left the desk because she sliced her hand open with a letter opener, and Miranda missed Lagerfeld just before he boarded a 17-hour flight to Australia. She now works at TV.
she's vindictive too. In reality, toxic behavior is not so obvious. Movies exaggerate things to make them really clear to the audience and more entertaining. And we'll go into what real toxic behavior looks like a little bit later, but first, I want you to pay attention to something else. The other people on Miranda's team. Nigel is helpful and generous. Emily is
Okay. First of all, you and I answer the phones. The phone must be answered every single.
also helpful,
I refuse to be sick. I'm wearing Valentino for Christ's sake.
vulnerable,
Thank you.
and even grateful. They're the helpful ones in this office. They're also victims. Or are they?
I can get another girl to take your job in 5 minutes. One who really wants it.
Is this her, the new me? Hi, told you.
I thought you were kidding.
No, quite serious, yeah.
You do know that cellulite is one of the main ingredients in corn chowder.
That I can't even talk about.
Okay, maybe they're not that great. It gets even worse when we look at Andrea.
My name is Andrea, but everybody calls me Andy.
She's so nice and friendly and worthy of our sympathy. But what happens next?
Make sure Miranda gets these as soon as possible.
Great,
Tell her that
can't
I
wait.
switched to...
She becomes sarcastic,
Me? Can we adjust the attitude?
I can't do that, Miranda. I can't. Why? I didn't have a choice. Oh, you know how she is.
That is a pathetic excuse.
she doesn't have a choice.
That, yes, there are things that Miranda does that I don't agree with. But
Come on, you hate her. Just admit it to me.
no.
She's a notorious sadist.
Okay, she's tough, but if Miranda were a man, no one would notice anything about her except
She even defends her toxic boss.
Sorry, I can't believe this. You're defending her?
This is a fiction movie. Everything is exaggerated. Do you see what's happening to her? It doesn't just impact her work life, it impacts every aspect of her life. Andrea changes.
Hi, Miranda. I'm leaving right now. Now, you guys didn't have to be such assholes.
This glamazon who skulks around in corners with some random hot fashion guy?
She becomes someone else.
I don't get her.
Great, now you're gonna give me a hard time too.
She doesn't like being called on it.
Andy, what the hell is wrong with
I
you?
didn't have a choice, okay? Miranda asked me and I couldn't say no.
I know, that's your answer for everything lately. I didn't have a choice. Like this job was forced on you, like you don't make these decisions yourself.
Notice this theme. She doesn't have a choice. It's like it's someone else making decisions for her. There's a really important truth here.
What happened? Now you've become one of them.
That's absurd.
That's okay, that's fine. Just own up to it.
I couldn't do what you did to Nigel, Miranda. I couldn't do something like that. But you all
That's not what that was different. I didn't have a choice.
Oh, no, you chose. You chose to get ahead.
As long as you're in the trap, it's actually true that you don't have a choice. Because you have to be conscious to have a choice. The mirror trap is that we unconsciously mirror the behaviors of higher status people around us. It's normal to do that. We do that whether we want to or not, because we're human. If you're working for a toxic boss right now, you're doing that too, whether you know it or not. So what can we do about it? Maybe Horrible Bosses, another movie about toxic bosses, has a suggestion for us. Well, no, unfortunately, that's another place where movies don't match real life. To show the way out, here's another really personal story. Back in my 20s, in my first job, I once got some feedback that totally floored me. I was fresh out of university, working for a large consulting company, the most junior person on the team. This older consultant took me aside one evening at the pub and told me I was a bully. At first, I didn't think that was possible. How could I be a bully? I had no power and I hated bullies. I didn't fit in very well, so I spent my childhood being bullied at school. Bullying someone else was the last thing I would do. He couldn't be right, could he? I asked him for his reasoning, and he described what he called intellectual bullying. How I would use my mind to mercilessly argue people into a corner until they had to admit that they were wrong. I feel bad saying this even today, but yeah, I did do this. Of course, I argued with him about this, kind of making his point. But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was some truth in his feedback. This was really uncomfortable. Could I myself be doing this thing that I absolutely hated with every fiber of my being, and doing it without even realizing it? What if he was right? What did that mean about me? How is it possible? I later learned that it's just part of being human. People who are abused or bullied as children often turn into abusers or bullies later in life. In fact, the kids who do the bullying are often themselves being abused at home by parents who themselves were abused as children and so on. It wasn't only possible, it was common. I'm forever grateful to this colleague for pointing it out. I've forgotten most of my colleagues from this project, but I remember him. Thanks, Warren. So how did I get out of that trap myself? And more importantly, how can you get out of the trap? Well, there's 3 steps you absolutely must take if you're working for a toxic boss. And until you take all 3, you're still in the trap and it will continue ruining your life. Here's number 1.
You know that last month you made me work so late, I missed saying goodbye to my Gam, and she died before I made it to the hospital.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I had no idea that you called your grandmother Gam.
This is the movie version. The real toxic behavior is often subtle. Learn to recognize it.
Morals for spring. Groundbreaking.
Toxic leaders belittle people around them.
Perfect. Thank God somebody came to work today.
Even when they pay compliments, they find a way to insult others.
Contrast between the femininity of the florals and the more raw, rough human background would create this wonderful tension with...
No.
They give no useful feedback.
Does anybody else have anything I can possibly use? Antibacterial wipes, perhaps?
They despise people of lower status.
Because if I do something right, it's unacknowledged. She doesn't even say thank you. But if I do something wrong, she is vicious.
They rarely praise and constantly criticize.
Truth is, there is no one that can do what I do.
They think they're important, like the world can't exist without them, even as the evidence mounts that it really can.
Another divorce. Splashed across page 6. Just imagine what they're gonna write about me.
All they can think about is themselves, and it shows. You don't need to know for sure that you have a toxic boss. It's enough to have some doubts about it. If you think your boss is maybe toxic, maybe shows some of those traits, chances are you're right. That doesn't, by the way, mean there's some sort of evil demon out to get you. Toxic bosses are often themselves acting out the mirror trap. But when it comes to the impact on you, that's neither here nor there. You can't fix a toxic boss, so let go of that objective. Only they can fix themselves. But you can do something to help yourself. So step 1 is noticing you're in the trap. What's next?
What happened? Now you've become one of them.
This glamazon who skulks around in corners with some random hot fashion guy? I don't get her.
The first people who will notice the impact on you and help you reflect on it are those who know you already. And if you ask them, They'll probably tell you how you become more aggressive or more sullen, or how you don't smile as much. That's great, and you need to double down on that. Make sure you keep talking to them and ask them for feedback. Going back to my story about bullying, I knew I was being bullied at school, and I had left that environment years before. But until this colleague pointed out how my behavior was exactly the same, I was still in the trap. You need other people to help you notice the ways in which you're in the trap, the ways in which you've changed, and you'll continue to need them even after you action step 3. You have to get out of there. Every day you spend in a toxic environment causes real damage to you. Now, I understand that everyone's circumstances are different. Not everyone can just quit. And if that's you and you're stuck with this toxic boss for now, my heart goes out to you, really. And you really need to get out of there. Until you do, the best you can do is limit the damage by talking to your friends. The healing only really begins once you're out of the trap. There's one problem you might notice with this whole get out step.
Morning. Oh, morning. You must be Nick. I am.
From what I hear, people say he's the nicest guy in the world.
Mr. Sherman, I'm sorry your coffee was cold. Lou?
Most people.
Mr. Sherman, I'm hungry. Can I come out now, please? You hear that? No. Sounds like there's someone in your trunk.
What if you get out of the trap only to fall into another? Well, unless you know how to evaluate a workplace before you even join, you're flying blind. Most companies say whatever they want on their recruitment websites. You can't really learn much from that. Luckily, I ran a business for a decade and I interviewed over 1,000 people. And I discovered that there's a few key questions that you can ask that will reveal a whole lot about the workplace you're joining. And there's a really key time when you can ask them, during salary negotiations. And as a bonus, approaching things this way also maximizes your salary in the long run. So check out this video if you want to know more about how to make sure that your next workplace is a fantastic workplace. I hope you find joy in your work, as everyone deserves to.